So, is it more than just a rebranding? Just as the leader of the Islamist-led alliance that toppled Syria's Assad has dropped his wartime alias, Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, can Ahmed al-Shara's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, shed its past as the al-Nusra Front, a hardline offshoot of al-Qaeda? France 24's Wassim Nasr was one of a handful of journalists to interview al-Sharaa on Monday. You'll hear a little bit later on what he had to say. For the president-elect of the United States, it was Turkey that toppled Assad. Donald Trump calling it a hostile takeover. This as the outgoing Biden administration reportedly sounds the alarm over a potential Turkish invasion of northern Syria to oust U.S.-backed Kurdish militias, said militias who guard ISIS prisoners for the West. In the middle, well, there's Europe, sending dignitaries and diplomats to both Ankara and Damascus this Tuesday. When is the right time for normalization? How much has the map of the region actually been redrawn? Today in the France 24 debate, the West eyes normalization of ties with the new masters of Syria. Joining us from Washington, he was U.S. ambassador to Syria at the start of the uprising against Assad. Robert Ford today, a fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
From Cairo, Dareen Khalifa, senior advisor at International Crisis Group. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back, Syrian. We welcome Syrian refugee and human rights activist Bushra al-Zubi. Thanks for being with us here in our Paris studios.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks as well to columnist and academic Samir Aita, president of the Arab Economists Circle. Good to see you again.
Hello, thank you very much.
You can listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. Let's begin in Syria's second city, Aleppo, and cross live to France 24's Andrew Hillier. Andrew, we're looking for sort of litmus tests here of what the HTS is about, what the new rulers of Syria are about, and you went to where they had been ruling these past 7 years, Idlib province.
That is correct. Our team went to Idlib yesterday. Idlib, a bastion of what was then the Syrian opposition, held by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham since 2017. And what we found were people who were proud that the lightning offensive that toppled the Assad regime started in their city and in their province. We spoke to people who boasted about Idlib, saying that it had constant supplies of electricity, that it didn't have blackouts like other cities in Syria, that it had free Wi-Fi everywhere. One man telling us that he thought that Idlib was more developed than other cities in Syria. But what we also discovered was a very austere, conservative place where many people, if not most people, support a radical interpretation of Islam. We spoke to young students as well. One young woman telling us that she thinks that the teaching of the Quran should be made compulsory in schools. Another young student telling us that he thought that women shouldn't be allowed to wear makeup and that Western clothes should be banned too for women, and that Idlib's strict rules should be progressively rolled out across Syria. One man speaking to us on a marketplace also appearing to call for revenge to be taken against those who used to support the Assad regime. So, you know, almost everyone in Idlib that we spoke to also had a personal tale of suffering and of loss. And that's why people in Idlib see Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as liberators, as the group that finally brought stability not only to Idlib but to Syria too. And that's why it's important to follow what's happening in Idlib, because that could provide clues as to what will happen elsewhere in Syria.
Was there any pushback that you experienced?
I would say that we didn't find any open critics of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham on the streets of Idlib. That, of course, does not mean that there aren't any critics of the group in Idlib. It may just mean simply that people are afraid to criticize the group because they may be scared of reprisals. We know that there have been protests against the group in Idlib that have been repressed. That happened several months ago. Interestingly, the most pushback we heard was from an official from Idlib government, from the Ministry of Communications. Now, he was a media-savvy, very well-spoken figure, and he told us that Idlib had particular circumstances, that it had effectively been ruled under a state of emergency, and that there was no reason why its model of government would be rolled out across the rest of Syria. So interestingly, an official from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham basically pushing back against the group's own fundamentalist support base in Idlib. Another interesting thing he told us was that the majority of people who held important government posts in Idlib had now gone to Damascus to take up important government posts in the Syrian capital. So in Idlib, they've been kind of left with this skeleton administration, and it's again another reason why why what's happened in Idlib is important, because it may very well give us clues as to what's in store for Syria.
Many thanks for that. Andrew Hillier reporting live there from Aleppo. Bushra Al-Zubi, your reaction listening there?
So I think, the whole Syrian population, I think the world should be happy to have gotten rid of this big dictator, because I don't think the repercussions and the good consequences about his fall impacts only Syrians. We've seen that it impacted Lebanese prisoners. They got out of prison, Palestinians, and they got rid of the atrocity of the regime that have touched every single person in the region. And also I think for the world it's very symbolic, because it shows how resistance and a popular revolution can actually pay off at the end. So yeah, we're happy. And also today was funny because I saw this comment on one of the videos that said, yeah guys, you're happy, these videos will grow old really badly, which means that we will see what will happen next. It would be very bad, and you will regret having been happy. I don't think anyone in the world will regret having been happy and celebrating the fall of Assad. So, yeah, I think we're happy, but obviously we are apprehensive of what is coming.
Apprehensive, Samir Aita, I know you didn't bring a crystal ball to this conversation, but the United Nations today stating they expect in the first half of 2025, 1 million Syrians to return home. Based on what you heard there from Andrew Hillier, based on Bushra's opinion and viewpoint, your thoughts on that?
First, the model of Idlib, in fact, cannot be transmitted to all Syria. It was a particular situation.
It was already a conservative place before.
It's not because of the conservative. It's because of the political economy. HTS took care of companies. It has its fuel company, its electricity company, its telecommunication company, etc. So making money, free economy. While half of the population of the Idlib area were IDPs. And these IDPs were taken care by international communities and NGOs. So he doesn't have to care about the population. Now in global Syria, you have 80%, according to the UN, under poverty line. So who will take care of the 80%? This is a major question. While they are telling everybody that they will reproduce the model of Idlib. The model of Idlib cannot be reproduced in Syria in economy, in political economy, and in imposing the conservative rules imposed in Idlib. In Damascus, it will not work. In Haran, it will not work. Even if they are mostly Sunni Muslim, they have peculiar way to see the things. The same in Homs, the same in other areas. So this will not come. Even if the language today is good, people didn't return as refugees. If you look at Turkey, refugees in Turkey, refugees in Jordan, and refugees in Lebanon, the flow, there is some flow, but mostly if you calculate the total of the flow with the people who took refuge in Lebanon, the flow is negative. It means more people left Syria in the last 10 days than people came. Who returned home? The IDPs. Precisely the IDPs of Idlib, who get bored to be paid and many things and etc. and waiting for the NGOs and the international communities to get them food baskets. They want to get back home and work.
It's only 9 days in. You primed the pump beautifully because we can cross now to France 24's Wassim Nasr, who on Monday was one of a small group of international journalists who sat down with Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, a.k.a. Ahmed al-Sharaa, the head of HTS. Before I ask you about the circumstances, Wassim, of that interview, just to answer what was just said there by Samir Aita, was he conscious of what Samir just said, that you can't reproduce the model of Idlib elsewhere in Syria?
Of course, the model of Idlib is very particular to Idlib, with the situation that was clearly described. And of course, they don't have the human resources to duplicate what they did in Idlib to other places in Syria. And either ways, it won't be adapted to all other places in Syria, either on administration level or on other levels. And this is why, actually, Jolani or Ahmed al-Sharaa is reaching out to the international community to lift sanctions that were imposed on Syria under the rule of Assad, saying that, okay, now the sanctions are here, we are the victims of Assad, and we are paying for the sanctions while he is gone. So one of his main objectives is the lifting of the sanctions in order to put the country on the road of reconstruction again, which is very important, actually, because 80%, as it was said, and even more, are under the poverty average.
And those sanctions, we should point out, to a large degree, they're enforced by the United States Treasury. His message was directed at whom specifically when he spoke with you?
Well, to the international community, actually, and he talked about the sanctions, he talked about the resolution 2245, saying that it is all dated now, it should be reviewed, it's 9 years old, and he said that they actually implemented one of its indications, meaning putting out of Syria foreign militias, meaning Shia militias, Hezbollah, and also, as he said, the peaceful transfer of power in the administration, meaning that they did not enforce they did not destroy, actually, the administration of the country. And we saw how they made like a transit of power between the former prime minister under Assad and their new prime minister. And that's what happened, actually, on many levels of the administration, the police and other ministries. But we have to wait and see how it's going to unfold, actually. But because the main point is they don't have enough money and they don't have enough manpower.
How did he seem to you? Was he a cool customer?
Well, he seemed confident. You know, I saw him a year ago in Idlib, and the situation was much more critical. And back at the time, we discussed many issues, and among them was the issues of IDP and the issue of Idlib, meaning the fate of Syria is being discussed without the Syrians. And I asked him at the time if he actually will abide by Turkish orders or to go behind a road called the M4. And he was like, no, we have to take more land at least to put back the IDPs in their own villages west of Aleppo. And actually that's what they did now. So it's a momentum for them, and he is taking off the military clothes, as we saw, and putting up the civilian clothes, because he is saying that it is the normal things to do now, because it's a phase of reconstruction, of dissolving all the factions, all opposition organs, and he's asking all the Syrians from abroad, opponents, to come back as individuals, actually, to help them rebuild Syria. But it is too soon to have like final judgments on him or his policy. It's really too soon. They took down Assad in 11 days, true, and we are maybe like 2 weeks now from the downfall of Assad. So it is premature maybe to presume that we can see clearly the policy that is going to be implemented.
Wassim Nasr, many thanks for joining us live there from Syria. Robert Ford, a lot to unpack in what you just heard. And first off, the United States, should they really crippled the Assad regime by choking his access to oil and gas money. When's the right time to ease or lift those sanctions?
The Biden administration has said that they're willing to discuss both sanctions and foreign terrorist organization designation, but they want first to get a sense of where the new Syrian temporary government is going. They want to get an understanding of where this HTS organization is headed with its other partners in the Syrian government. So I don't think Washington is going to move precipitously. The first thing they need to do is establish communications with them. And over the weekend, Tony Blinken said that they now are having direct contacts. My sense is that mostly what Washington is talking about right now with HTS is the fate of missing Americans, including Austin Tice, the journalist.
Yeah, whose fate is still unknown. What do you make of, I don't know if we should be calling him Abu Mohammed al-Jolani or Ahmed al-Sharaa?
Well, I spearheaded the effort to put him and his organization on the foreign terrorist organization list when I was leading the Syria team for the Department of State back in 2012. To be very frank, now, fast forward to 2024, it would be difficult to find the legal justification under American law to place them on the foreign terrorist organization list now. They did break formally with al-Qaeda, and they actually fought battles against al-Qaeda in Idlib. They broke also with the Islamic State and fought really nasty battles with them in 2014, 2015. They've asked for example, international cooperation and help in securing and disposing of Syrian chemical weapons sites. Not something I can imagine Osama bin Laden or Ayad Baghdadi or Mohammed Zarqawi ever doing. Some of this may be public relations, and I think it's important to open channels with them and press them a little bit on this and see if they actually implement what they promise.
Dareen Khalifa, you agree?
I do agree, and I think the key is to press them on what they promise. A lot of people ask, should we take them at face value? And my response is always going to be, never take any politician at face value. You should always press them on what they promise. So as someone who's been following HTS and Jolani for many years, I've been also engaging directly with the group throughout my research in Idlib. I've had several interviews with Jolani over the years. I first met him at a time where HTS was cornered in the military, militarily on the ground. They were losing very quickly to the Russians and the regime. I also spoke to him at a time where they were more comfortable, where there was a ceasefire, and he was not wearing a military suit. He was trying to govern, and he was trying to build things and open economic relations with Turkey. And I spoke to him a couple of days before they went into Damascus. And I think the constant in all of these interviews I've conducted with him was that, A, he has a lot of ambitions. He's willing to take a lot of risk to achieve these ambitions. But he's also very pragmatic and very practical. And when he speaks about his break with al-Qaeda, as Ambassador Ford pointed out, he has evidence to demonstrate that this break is real, not just with AQ and ISIS, but with all transnational jihadist organizations in general. They've stopped the areas they've controlled from becoming a launchpad for these organizations. They went after them in Idlib. And they've been focusing, well, at least prior to this offensive, focusing on governing Idlib and opening up to regional and international countries. So they have a lot to show for in terms of what they've done. They have a lot to do in order to demonstrate that they deserve to be removed from the terrorism list. And I think the key now in this pivotal moment in Syria's history is for the US and the West to come forward with a list of conditions, very clear conditions on what is it exactly that they expect this group to do, and then follow through on this in order to remove the sanctions and the designations off of them. I personally think this is, it's so important that they do this right, and they don't do it in a rushed manner. but they also need to like avoid mistakes in the past in which they use their sanctions and designations as just punitive measures for life without setting clear conditions for reversing them. These sanctions are meant to be a policy tool to leverage behavioral change, and that's exactly what they should be using it for.
And just very briefly on this, Darine, you know, the viewers from around the world, they have the example in mind of what happened in 2003 in Iraq after the toppling of Saddam Hussein, a big purge of the ruling party. Are Syrians conscious of that? How far do you go in purging?
I think they're very conscious of that. I mean, Jolani, more than most, has a lot of background in Iraq and a lot of experience in Iraq. And that's why some of his early interviews in that offensive were very much geared towards emphasizing that they're keen on preserving state institutions. They talked about amnesties, but he really overly emphasized the importance of preserving state institutions and that they're not going to be imposing collective punishment on a specific sect that supported the group or on specific individuals that were just kind of like rank and file in different regime apparatuses. So I think that lesson from Iraq is very well entrenched in the mindset of HTS leadership, but also among many Syrians.
What just happened in Syria, a rebel-led swoop against the crumbling army of a demoralized regime, says HTS and its allies. A hostile takeover by neighboring Turkey, says Donald Trump. Trump, who's still weighing whether or not to pull out the 900 U.S. troops that are in Syria that support Kurdish-led SDF militias. As you can see, there's the military base on this map. Trump, who spoke on Monday.
Now we have 900. They put some back, but 900, if you're talking about two, now one of the sides has been essentially wiped out, but nobody knows who the other side is. But I do. You know who it is? Turkey. Okay? Turkey's the one behind it. He's a very smart guy. They've wanted it for thousands of years, and he got it. And those people that went in are controlled by Turkey. And that's okay. It's another way to fight. But no, I don't think that I want to have our soldiers killed. But I don't think that will happen now anyway because the one side's been decimated.
All right. First off, Samir Aita, are those people, HTS and its allies, controlled by Turkey?
Not exactly. Let me start first that I'm very happy to be here with both Darine and Robert. Hi, Robert. That I know that they engaged Jolani, Ahmed, al-Sharaa since years. Then them and Jonathan Powell, the British of intermediate. So this process came to an end, but it was worked out by some people in the U.S. and others. The move to prepare, of course, he was prepared to make a fight, but the move was made just after that Netanyahu threatened Bashar al-Assad. And of course, it was supported by Turkey, etc. Was it the hand of Turkey? Not exactly. It was mainly the move of Netanyahu and the Biden administration, in my opinion.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, guesses. This is big politics. It means who could have guessed that the Iranian will retract completely and the Russians will retract completely and played. You were talking about the Syrian army. The Syrian army has been dismantled, and this is the comparison with Iraq. While it could be handed over, negotiated, and etc., and you have no security apparatus today in Syria. Even HTS doesn't have the capability to control all the factions that they have around. And dismantling security apparatus in a country could lead, maybe not now, because the Syrians are happy of having the freedom of speech and etc., but the contradictions come over. Even with all, just one phrase, even with all the learning, the teaching he got, Mr. Ahmed al-Sharaa, he makes big mistakes. One of the mistakes, for example, he was receiving the Druze, and he said, we should have a national convent between the state and the communities. A national covenant, which means the base of the state, is between citizens, not between the state. The agreement between all citizens make the state, and not a state who knows who is the state today in Syria, make with each community an agreement.
Isn't that the Lebanese model, though?
This is worse than the Lebanese model, because somehow in Lebanon there is equilibrium between the communities. Here there is the overwhelming community.
Yeah,
we will learn. We have to learn how to deal with different groups and sects and
I was talking about
religions and mentalities in Syria, because it's very multi-confession that is really have to deal with it, because Assad never let go of the power and was always in the hands of his clan, his Alawite clan. It's not even the whole Alawite community.
Okay, so I will put to you, Bushra al-Zubi, a statement that al-Jolani put out on Telegram today. All rebel factions in Syria will be, quote, disbanded and the fighters trained to join the ranks of the defense ministry.
I think today he's faced with a very difficult decision between reconciliation and justice. Today we need to give people some kind of justice, because people are getting really angry about not getting any sort of justice. But I think it's not only his responsibility. I think the international community has failed Syria for a very long time, which means that they had all the documentation, all the proofs that Assad has been violating international law and human rights, international humanitarian law for years, and they didn't do anything. And today, I think it's their obligation and their responsibility to help with transitional justice, but also other challenges that are in the country. And as you really beautifully said also, I forgot your name. Darine, that no longer punitive sanctions that doesn't do anything. These sanctions should be used very wisely, but also in a perspective that is not infantilizing or condescending. It has to be a deal with al-Jolani to never find another way like Assad did. He turned the country into a narco state to avoid these sanctions. These sanctions didn't do anything. So it really has to be a bilateral condition and deal with Assad, so that we move forward never with Assad again, but with al-Jolani and other people. And we really have to say that it's not only Jolani that liberated Syria. We talk about a lot of other Syrians that were implicated in the whole operation that has been done. And we also talk about Syrians who have been in Idlib for years now, and they are kids who joined the army so that they liberate their own country after having been really oppressed for years and years. So I think it did happen after a very long time of oppression and a long time of feeling so desperate with Assad.
All right, so there's the second part of what we heard from Donald Trump, which is about Erdogan pulling the strings or not in Syria. Samir disagrees. There's the first part of what he said, which is whether or not it's timely for the U.S. to keep its 900 troops there for the time being. Those troops, again, a reminder, they are there to help fight ISIS, which still has pockets, and to help the Kurdish-led SDF. The Wall Street Journal, quoting Biden administration officials, is sounding the alarm over a troop buildup by the Turks that could signal a full-scale invasion of northern Syria. Even some Republicans disagree with Donald Trump when it comes to pulling out troops, like the South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
Turkey is putting pressure on the Kurds in northeastern Syria. We need a demilitarized zone. Turkey has legitimate concerns about some of these Kurdish elements, but if Turkey attacks the Kurds and these ISIS fighters break out of jail, it's a nightmare for us, it's a nightmare for Syria, it's a nightmare for the world. That cannot happen.
Robert Ford, should those U.S. troops stay or go from Syria?
I've long argued that the American troops should withdraw from Syria. The last territory controlled by the Islamic State was captured at Baghouz in Syria in 2019, 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. And for the last 5 years, American forces have been running around Syria with a Syrian Kurdish factions militia, essentially chasing groups of 5 here and 10 there. They're not in a position to control territory. There is a large prison at El Hol, and security arrangements need to be made for that. but I don't think we sent 900 American soldiers to be prison guards. And in the end, the enduring solution to the problem of recruitment into the Islamic State is empowering Sunni Arab communities in eastern Syria to manage the problem and address economic and social grievances from those communities. I think actually it would be useful to raise this with Damascus. It's probably good for viewers to know that the Islamic State has already denounced Ahmed al-Sharaa and the government in Damascus. And of course, they have a history of fighting, which we talked about earlier in the program. And so in the end, this needs to be a discussion that involves Turkey, the United States, and the government in Damascus.
But do you share the Biden administration, if that Wall Street Journal report is true, the Biden administration's concern that Turkey might be launching some kind of major operation against groups that have proved allies to the United States, those Kurdish left SDF forces?
For too long, we have avoided working with Sunni Arab communities in favor of relying on the Syrian Kurdish faction that I mentioned. It's really time, it's way overdue to shift and to focus help and assistance on the Sunni Arab communities from which this recruitment into ISIS comes. The Syrian Kurds cannot fix that problem. We've seen that over 5 years. My problem with people like Senator Lindsey Graham is they don't think ahead. They're always looking backwards.
Dareen Khalifa, you agree?
It's one of the very few things I disagree with Ambassador Ford on. I don't think the U.S. should stay in Syria perpetually, but I also don't think they can leave now without leaving a huge mess behind. Now, when the U.S. intervened in Syria to fight ISIS and they took the decision to partner with what was the time the YPG, a Kurdish militant group with roots in Turkey, basically, I thought that was incredibly problematic. A lot of people thought that was incredibly problematic, and we advocated against it, and we advocated exactly what Ambassador Ford is now saying, that they should be working with local communities more, and that whatever alliances they create should be reflective of the local demography. Now, so in order not to look back, as he pointed out, I think, and to look forward, we need to realize what's done is done. They've decided on their partner now. The SDF has lost thousands of people in the fight against ISIS. They continue to do most of the heavy lifting in terms of fighting remaining ISIS cells and guarding ISIS prisoners and their families. Now, all the geostrategic that happened as a result of the fight against ISIS is a result of U.S. decision-making. I don't think Washington should today wash its hands off of that and claim that it has nothing to do with it the way President Trump is pointing out. Of course, it has everything to do with it. It's their creation. This mess is exactly the byproduct of what they've done in the last few years. Now, again, not saying that the U.S. should stay forever, but they should stay until a deal is reached that would protect the area with all its components, Arabs and Kurds, and it should protect U.S. partners who fought and lost so much in the fight against ISIS. I don't think that's too much to ask. Now, especially that the main threat coming to the area comes from a U.S. ally, comes from Turkey, right? Again, I agree with Lindsey Graham, and I rarely agree with Lindsey Graham on a lot of things, but that, I mean, Turkey has legitimate grievances when it comes to Syria, and it comes with the Kurdish militant groups operating there. I think those can be addressed, but they need to be addressed around a negotiating table. If the U.S. ups and leaves today, they will lose any leverage in negotiations with Turkey over the future of the Northeast. So my recommendation would be stay until a process is in place in which there could be negotiations over the final state of northeastern Syria and a way to protect the people who fought and lost a lot in the fight against ISIS in order to protect the whole world, really, from their danger.
What's certain is that Turkey's president has had a good run these last 2 weeks. They've also reopened an embassy in Damascus. Turkish intelligence chief Ibrahim Khalil flew into the Syrian capital just day. We're going to talk about Netanyahu in a moment. Turkey's president, though, making no secret about who he's targeting when he speaks with the head of the European Commission this Tuesday.
The fight against the Islamic State group and the PKK was one of the issues we discussed. Turkey is the only country, the only NATO ally that has defeated both terrorist organizations on the ground. We won't allow these organizations to grow.
Samir Aita, are Turkey and the United States on a collision course, or is this, just a bit of leveraging and bargaining? And
there are different ways. They are different in the ways they see the things, and this is why I said that Jolani was not completely manipulated by Turkey, even if the Turkish secret services are his personal guard. This is a complex story. Look at what happened in the beginning when they went to Aleppo. He kept, for a certain moment, the factions completely controlled by Turkey, who are in the north of Aleppo, the national army, called the National Army. They kept them from fighting with the Kurds. But then when the fight came out, because you cannot keep them a lot of time, and they went to the Kurdish areas of northern Aleppo, he negotiated, but I think through the Americans, that the SDF withdraw, that the population of these areas, the Kurdish population, go elsewhere. So they have, the US and the Turks have different aims. Of course, for Turkey, the question of the PKK and etc. is complicated. But for Jolani and for the US, there is a bargain. And the bargain will be different between the Biden administration and thing. From a Syrian point of view, all this is the game of nations. From a Syrian point of view, what is important is to have the unification again of the Syrian territory, and with a deal with the Kurds in the areas where they are mostly present, to have some leverage on the local things and etc., to retrieve the oil production, which is low today, but which is necessary for rebuilding Syria. But anyhow, this decentralization, which is very, the Kurds are very attached for, will come anyhow. Jolani doesn't control Homs. Jolani doesn't control Aleppo. He's putting holes, doesn't control Daraa. So now the things are developing a bit and a bit. All his team is in Damascus.
So maybe by negotiation something.
The decentralization with the process that is going on today. I'm talking about administrative management. The decentralization will come not only the Kurdish area, to all areas in Syria. He will have to negotiate with the people in Homs, with the people in Aleppo, and etc., how to run the country and how to have the things. And this is why, on the political level, it's necessary to have a national discussion inside Damascus of all the political and civil servants and the clear people to see the way ahead, including the SDF. The question if the Americans have to have the bases or not is indeed a detail. And I said, of course, they cannot run, and I agree with Robert, they cannot run Raqqa, Tabqa, Deir ez-Zor. These are Arab tribes, which means it will not work.
So there's, on the one hand, the north, and on the other hand, we saw this Tuesday Israel's prime minister go to Mount Hermon, which is Syrian territory. It's 2,800 meters high above the Golan Heights. He brought his security detail with him. They had a security meeting there. Our correspondent there saying it was a message sent to the new rulers of Damascus, as much as to the judges who are questioning him at his own corruption trial. Is this grandstanding, Bushra al-Zubi, or those images of a photo op, or is it more what we're seeing in the Golan Heights right now?
I think it's the same question about the Americans staying extra 5 years. They're just not respecting the international law. They jumped on the first opportunity of vacuum of power. They had no right whatsoever. And when we hear the spokesperson of Israel saying that these groups, they don't need chemical weapons, who is he to say that when he's using like almost mass destruction weapons against people in Gaza? I don't think he has any right or any legitimacy into taking this military, massive action in Syria. And today, just on a human level, I was talking to people from Tartus, because my sister is in Damascus, but all her in-laws are from Tartus.
The Mediterranean
Yeah, you
seaport.
should mention that.
Yeah, on the coast side, and they were saying that the magnitude of the bombardment was the magnitude of an earthquake. These people, it just woke up all the trauma inside them during the whole rule of
The
Assad.
Israeli military bombing Syrian military positions.
And some Turkish people in Turkey, in Antakya, they heard, they felt what happened. So I don't think I think the West now, their role is to help with reconstruction of Syria, to send forensic specialists to actually look into the mass graves. I think the political analysis is great, is very important, but at the same time now we have a humanitarian emergency. We need to look into what the conditions of people coming out of Sadnai and so many other prisons are, and what is happening with mass graves, because now today civilians are going to these mass graves, and it's very dangerous because we lose evidence. We lose the hope of ever knowing the identity of a person. So I think really today we need to talk about a grave humanitarian situation in Syria, because as you were saying, the IDPs are going back, but also we have 90, not even, I think Guterres and the special envoy to Syria of the UN said 90% of Syrians need emergency humanitarian aid. So today we're talking about a very important humanitarian situation that needs to be handled now.
On the Kurds, I would like to add a point.
We're almost out of time.
Yes. The Israelis are playing with this game with the Kurds. They are even publishing. They are playing with the Druze in South Syria, and they are publishing maps of an alliance between the Kurds and the Druze controlling the border with Iraq and Jordan. This is insanity.
So, Ambassador Ford, is the beginning of a new kind of conflict, or can we hope that Syria can find peace?
Well, I certainly hope Syria can find peace. And I think what Bashar al-Zabi just said about highlighting humanitarian assistance in this emergency situation and facilitating a Syrian-led effort on justice makes huge sense. That will come in the context of Israel exerting more and more military domination over the Levant at the same time that Turkey is filling a vacuum also left by Russia and Iran. And so we have two rising regional powers while the Syrians are trying to put back together their country.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. We're out of time. Robert Ford, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Washington. Dareen Khalifa in Cairo, Bushra Al-Zubi, Samir Aita, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.